Hello again, everybody, and welcome back to the Accelerator with Michael Conniff. That's me. We're a podcast devoted to founders, entrepreneurs, startups, and the venture capitalists and financial firms that serve them. We are a companion podcast to The Angel. We are all, in all cases, heard on all platforms, pretty much anywhere you can find, and on video with YouTube and Spotify. We've just started a new newsletter, so go to Conniff, conniff.substack.com, and you can sign up and get every single podcast. And today's going to be a good one. We're joined by Sean Branigan. He's the director of the Digital Media Entrepreneurship Program at the Newhouse School of Communications at Syracuse University. Boy, that is really a mouthful. Did I get
That
that
is
right?
too much, right? That is such an academic title, if
Did I
ever there
screw
was
up
one.
any part of that, or did I get through
No,
it?
but I love that it's Newhouse's name still lives on. So those who know it's
Yeah,
SI.
Newhouse was, of course, Advanced Publications and also Condé Nast, right? So would have been
Correct.
Vanity Fair and a bunch of actually really good magazines, The New Yorker, and many others. And you know what? When did he die? Did he die? He died not long ago, right?
Ooh, you're asking me, and I should probably know, but I don't
Yeah,
remember the year.
you should know. You wouldn't
Uh,
have a job without him. So.
yeah, that's right. I should make sure I know that. Yeah,
So
Donald.
Sean is also a very accomplished entrepreneur, and I actually, well, like all of us, and
Yeah.
I actually wanted to start out by asking you to talk about yourself as an entrepreneur. When did that? What was your experience, and how did you enter into? Enter into that because it reminds me a lot of my career because we're pretty contemporaneous. So tell us about what got you excited and what got you started.
Well, since you're in the journalism side, I started as studying for journalism, actually back at Newhouse, in the wake of Watergate. That was what I was bobbing in. And actually, when on campus, I worked at the Daily Orange. So I wanted to be a journalist, absolutely threw in, and they shunted me over into production manager, which is basically the list of all things that newspapers don't have to do that has been taken over by computers. That was my job. So nearly everything that I did, including bringing the galleys out and back to the office, et cetera, is all handled by the internet and technology and digital. Um, how I got into starting stuff was I probably deep down couldn't admit it to myself, but I kind of, I can now, is I wasn't even the best in the room. So how the hell am I going to make it as a journalist out in the industry? It's math. So I instead took the skills that I had in production and started a typesetting business. Big
Okay.
mistake of that was it was the sunset of the typesetting
Well,
industry.
you have to.
And
This is amazing, really. You have to. Not everybody knows what you're talking about. So explain what the typesetting business is.
Well, at this time, this was the new advance of typesetting. It was photo typesetting. So it was a spinning wheel of typefaces. I hate when people use font incorrect. Font is a typeface at a weight in a style in there's one other thing. There's four things to make a font, but we use that term generally. But all that was specialized and done by this machine about the size of a typical office desk, and a spinning light shooting through at the precise moment, and it would put the typeface and kern and do all those kinds of things to make beautiful typographic materials that would then go to press.
Hmm.
And all that's gone. It's all
So
at the
that
very
was
same
that
time
was
was being done by.
right out of college. You were obsolete.
I been paying attention, which is probably part of the reason I'm back, I wish someone had tapped me on the shoulder and said, "Have you seen this Macintosh? It's sort of
Yeah,
doing this." And
yeah,
yeah, well, they don't know
yeah.
how to do it like we do, and all those things that that we say when we see technology. So I got into typesetting, and then that failed. Took 4 years for me to give up on it, which was ridiculous. It
Hmm.
was pretty evident after 2 years. Um, and then I got hooked on this entrepreneuring thing. I
Well,
really
let me ask
liked
you
the
a
idea.
question. I just because how often do I get to ask about typesetting? But what about why
Thank
did
you.
why didn't you embrace or did you see coming what was known as desktop publishing, which is basically marrying the Macintosh to a laser printer? Was that too far away at that point?
No, we saw it actually. We were doing a thing called image setting, which was
Hmm.
putting together all of the high-end graphics that would go into a full markup and be pasted down. Remember those days? And pasted was a temporary thing
I do
to a
remember some of
lockup
those
board
things.
and all
Yeah.
those. I love the old technologies. I think that's what sort of sucker punched me into doing this. And it was familiar. We begin where we are and not.
Yeah.
Uh, so my lesson was in the second one, I started an internet company. So you can see where that was. I
What
like to
kind of
tell.
what kind of company?
Well, we were doing what would be called interactive marketing today, but those names weren't there. We did search engine optimization before Google even exists. We were doing it on the 6 to 10 major search engines that nobody's ever heard of that
Wait a
own the
minute. You mean
market.
there was a search engine before Google? How is that possible? Nobody
I
told me.
know, right? Whoa, no. They
Google
were
was
last
discovered.
of, yeah, they were late to the market.
Yeah.
They In 1998, I think they came into the market. I remember our search guy came in, Brad, and he said, "What do you think of this Google thing?" And I said, "I don't think so." Because
Yeah.
InfoSearch and InfoSeek and AltaVista and even Dogpile had a Dogpile, what a great name, right?
Yeah.
Had a position in that space, and it just again it was we didn't know what we didn't know, and what I did learn was this process of then taking action anyway, and we did okay. So the internet run turned out fine. We sold the company in December of 1999. So
Ooh. Okay.
yeah,
Now explain to
right, yeah,
the children
for
out there.
cash, for
Explain
cash.
to the children why that date is significant because not everybody was alive then, believe it or not.
I know. I've got children who cannot remember these big moments where we were biting our nails,
Mhm.
saying, our plane's gonna fall out of the sky. It was Y2K, and my contention was to my business partner who did not want to sell, is that I've seen too many things that are going to
Well, wait a minute.
erode our.
Didn't you get hit by the or just miss the 1999 Nasdaq explosion?
Well, all that was happening around us, but
Hmm.
when the internet bomb really happened, I think official date or the start date would be Genuity in March of 2000. And we sold the business in December before. My business partner called me a genius. He actually is a Mensa bona fide genius, so I just took that as a field promotion, and and I went on, and we then found out, wow, good thing we got out of this because the valuations and there was some of them that didn't even have revenue, much less profitability. Some of
I
them
could
were
have
just,
retired
it
on the
was
value.
mad. It was
Yeah,
a
I could have
madness time.
retired on the valuation my company Interactive Sports had back then. But valuations are a little bit like horseshoes. They don't, unless you have a ringer, it doesn't really count. So,
That's true.
okay, so you sell your company. It's still pretty early in the mix here in 1999. So you're entering the 21st century. What are you thinking? What's going through your mind at that point?
Well, we were along for the ride through the dot bomb because it was good to be employed. And then around 2004, we were the company that by that time in Boston that was buying up what would be called today cloud services companies.
Oh
And
wow.
we bought a whole bunch of anybody who's been in the telecom business. I just start dropping names like Interliant and Rocksite and those guys, they were really on. They were all really interesting plays, but it was all falling apart because of the dot bomb
20
period,
years ago.
right? And we rolled them up into about $125 million company, and we're ready to buy another $50 million company. And my nose is now pretty good at twitching. I said, I think the market's changed a lot. We had seen some companies in the Boston area, you might have heard of some of them, like Facebook, that we said that doesn't look normal. That doesn't look, it looks like a whole new play. And that's what happened in that period. I actually think right now we're in this very similar position.
Now, if you haven't
It
seen the
feels like
movie,
2007,
if you haven't
2008.
seen the movie, of course, the movie is Social Media, David Fincher's movie. Facebook started at Harvard, where there was such a thing called the Harvard Facebook, where every Harvard freshman was in the Facebook, the
In
Harvard
the
Facebook.
actual book,
It
right?
was an
Yeah.
actual book. Yeah, I was never in it, though. I went there because for some reason I didn't want to put my picture in that book, so I was never in what we call the Facebook. But
Wow.
anyhow, so you saw, in other words, you saw social media was about to rear its head. How come? I mean, I think this is important. How did you know that was going to be significant? How did you know that was a game changer in
Well, I
2000?
wouldn't just put it as social media. We saw social media. We saw more serious e-commerce plays. We saw a bunch of technical capabilities that made um, sort of thought experiments possible. And there were lots and lots of thought experiments from the late 90s that could then actually happen and take place. And then 2004, I was fired, and on a Friday, and on a Saturday, I launched an interactive marketing business around these startups. And we went, everybody but one of the marketing department that was laid off, brought him in to say, let's go work with some of these new startups. And we worked with higher technology, embedded systems, subsea cabling company, uh, because we knew that the deep down stuff is really hard for most. We were in the marketing side for storytellers in the marketing side to be able to grasp what is that and why this company or why that service offering, et cetera. So we did that kind of work as the
Let me
next
let
round.
me let me
So we
just
didn't get into social media.
let me mention one thing. My very first job in new media, I had a really smart boss at Link Resources in New York called Mark Plakius. And I'm always grateful that he hired me. It was my first job in new media. It was 1980. It was 1980.
Et cetera. Yeah, et
And
cetera.
so a long time ago. And he said, I remember him explaining to me the difference between a closed user group and narrowcasting because I didn't realize they were different. So narrowcasting is cable television and streaming as we now know it, with specific channels aimed at specific interests, right? But a closed user group was a group of users that in a group that required permission, and it was not open to anyone but those within the group. And I looked at that and I said, closed user groups. I mean, there are a couple of them around, but I said,
Sounds kind of like human beings being together. I don't
no,
know,
well,
right? Yeah.
yes, no, but I was like, no, nobody's ever going to do that. Like what? Well, that's Facebook, man. That's closed. That's a closed user group. So that idea was there in 1980, but
Yeah.
it took, it took he is a genius. It took the genius of Mark Zuckerberg to figure that out. And other people who he stole the idea from, apparently. The
Maybe. We'll
twins,
say
the
maybe,
twins,
right?
he stole it from the twins. But so anyhow, so you're an interactive marketer, and what happened to that company? Did you end up selling that subsequent company as well?
No, it was a lifestyle business, or a small business. We didn't take in any growth. We weren't about the growth part of it. We were about the applying our trade and doing our services and working with a terrific group of people that I had with that company. I love them, and many of us are still in touch. But as it went along, we started to see social media happening. I remember being at South by Southwest when Twitter was launched, and then Foursquare a couple of years after that. Things
Mm-hmm.
like that said, okay, the consumer side of this is really just blowing up again, which again gave me some worries as having gone through the dot bomb. But also, you could see there was capability. There wasn't just talk and no capability. Uh, I'd say the first part, this whole part is after the typesetting side, was me inflicting story on tech. And it was as I was seeing that, okay, we're going to wind down the company, walk off into different directions, our whole crew, for various reasons, personal reasons mostly. I started to think about coming back to media and saying, how about inflicting technology on media as my next act? So that's what I've been doing, is working with media companies and saying, you need to be like a tech company. You need to not just adopt or be an early adopter. You need to be shaping it. And that's what I think we're seeing. Most of those big companies that are called tech companies, I see them as their media companies. They're making money like media companies make from content distribution, et cetera.
What's the distinction? How do you make the distinction? I mean,
Well, if
originally
most of
there was a
yeah, I mean,
distinction.
I just look real simply as if their revenue is advertising. Isn't that evidence enough? You know, these big companies, most of their revenue is from advertising, getting people to watch things that they have either created or yeah.
Yeah.
So
But so you're saying advertising is tech, so you wouldn't like distinguish advertising from ad tech, for example, or programmatic advertising.
no, I think they have to start acting like tech. And tech doesn't just mean software and hardware. I love this. I think it was an Intel founder, I'm blanking on which one, who said high technology is ever increasing power and capability and ever decreasing cost. And if you see those kinds of things happening,
Would that be Gordon Moore, Moore's Law?
I don't think it was Moore. I think it
Or Andy
was
Grove, perhaps?
maybe it was Grove. Yeah, it sounds like an Andy Grove line, which is just stepping back and saying, I know this doesn't feel like lights flashing and software-y stuff, but there's a behavior here that says that's a high tech. Some elements are becoming high tech. And if you look at how much digital was flying into media companies, that's where I was saying, this isn't the same. Like if you give me a copy in 1980 of something and I give a copy of that to somebody else, it degrades. Digital, no degradation. It's as good as the original. And once you have that, yeah.
Yes. Yeah.
Once you have that, you have a ever increasing power and capability, ever decreasing price.
I want to get to your Newhouse experience pretty quick, but I have not heard this. I don't really understand this distinction entirely. But so what you're saying, advertise, if a media company is relying on advertising, it's essentially a tech company, and your role.
No, I was saying that tech companies, we call them tech companies, and most of them rely on advertising as their revenue. Facebook and Google in particular, they are doing tech as their product, but the reality is most of their business is a media business, is the way I look at it.
Yeah, I know, that's really interesting. I guess like in Google's case, advertising was actually an afterthought, and lots of people in the company fought it like hell and thought it would kill the company if they did advertising. And of course, now that nice little Dutch auction with Google AdSense is like 95% of their revenues, hundreds.
Pretty big number.
Yeah, pretty big number. So it sounds like you became kind of consultative. And how did that get you to the Newhouse School?
Well, I was looking at the business winding down. Our number one client was an offshore wind farm wiring company. It was all in Europe, and I knew they were going to be acquired, and they had told us, which is why they didn't have a hired PR and advertising marketing firm. They had us. And so in anticipation of that, I said, what do I want to do next? So I went back to my alma mater and I pitched the dean, Lorraine Branham. She's gone now. But and I said, I think we're looking at a whole bunch of things changing in media. I will give her I gave her a little bit of grace, and now I'm going to take some back. She said, oh yeah, I see it in newspapers, but it'll never happen in TV. And I said, I think it's going to happen in TV. I think it's going to be even more dramatic in TV. And now we're looking at.
You were right.
Wow, it's this is the nose.
So
I got really good.
You're at Syracuse's journalist. A lot of journalists come out of Syracuse.
Journalists, filmmakers, music industry
Well, you
people.
were in the right place you were in the
Yeah,
right place. What was the year of that
that was
discussion?
20. I started talking to her about in 20, probably 2010. And then by 2011, mid 2011, she said, okay, I'll let you do this, but you got to wait for an office. I said, no. And so I sat in the middle of the school with a sign pointing at my head saying, tell me about your business, just
That's
like
great.
an entrepreneur should.
Yeah, and so this was the beginnings of the Entrepreneurship Center at the Newhouse School, the Digital Media Entrepreneurship Center. Um, so Sean, in 2010, 2011 is still in many ways, though you had been in it a long time by that point, is still very early days. And essentially your the clientele, meaning the students, are aspire correct me if I'm wrong, but mainly aspiring to be journalists, right? Or
No, I
public
would say that,
relations, or communications oriented type people.
yeah, as it breaks out, we have about 2,000 students, all media crazed. Smallest segment of that is journalists.
Oh,
Largest are in the television, radio, and film, which is kind of think of it as the entertainment department.
yeah.
And next largest, I think, is public relations and advertising.
Okay,
So,
so I was wrong. I always associate it with journalism because of people like Mike Tirico, and I think
yeah, we have,
Bob Costas went there, and
yeah,
many famous sports
Steve
people.
Croft. Yeah.
Yeah, Steve Croft, who is my neighbor out here in East
Oh,
Hampton.
yeah.
Yeah,
Give him a new house hello.
I will. I didn't know he was Newhouse, so I will. Listen, but so you're sitting there, and you're at a point where Facebook and social media has arrived, hasn't, is really starting to take over the world. Google's been in place for a long time. So, what kind of then and now? What kind of digital entrepreneurs are you seeing? Like, what are people interested? What are they? And let's do then first, because I think now is going to be a little different. But what was happening then?
So I had this one captures it perfectly. I had one student who had a startup that she wanted to name the next Zuck. There
Yes,
was this the next Zuck, and
Zuck.
she
Oh, the
didn't.
next.
Yeah,
I'm
the
sorry.
next Zuck. Yeah, sorry,
Okay.
the next Zuck. And she didn't want to go with that name because she thought she'd get sued. And I said, this would be the greatest day ever if you get sued by
Yeah,
Zuckerberg
you would think it.
because, yeah, because he's actually helping you. And would he? Probably not, because what would you gain from it? So that was the vibe was, oh man, this is the time. So much going on. Big digital. That's why the digital is in the name, is big and digital and high scale, and let's go after it. And all things are open. And we had a lot of students that did things in that space. I encourage them to start it while they're in school, not wait.
I was actually teaching at exactly that moment. I had helped to found the Isaacson School for New Media at Colorado Mountain College, and I remember very clearly that people were really freaked out, who were particularly adults taking courses, because they were like, "It's changing so fast, I can't keep up with it." And
Yeah,
I had a contrarian view of that. I was like, actually, it's not. Social media is a generational change, and they don't come along every year. They come along about every 15 years. Was kind of my
right.
theory about it. But it's like there is not going to be another social media next year. It's this is the one, right? But the rate of change at that point was very daunting, for particularly for people just getting into it. But what kind of entrepreneurs were you minting at that point?
Some early ones that have gone on to do some things. I've had two teams out of a really small set, a sample set, that have gotten into Y Combinator. I've
Uh-huh.
had quite a few that have gotten Techstars, others that have gotten venture backed. So I have some of those. The ones I like pointing to are the ones that went off and did something, and then they 18 months after graduating, they're on the phone with me crying that they have to put it down and take a job. Well, I love that. I have this one slide I call the failure slide. Here's our failures. They're at Roku and the head of innovation at Netflix, and because it made them different, and they learned a different skill and got
Mhm.
muscles in areas that they needed that they weren't normally getting in their other classes, frankly. And their Google, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah,
So
that's great.
what I found, ones that went off, I have none that I can say, oh, home run hit. A lot of singles, doubles, to use the baseball metaphor. And most of them personal success rather than particularly business success. A couple exceptions to that.
Well,
Lalo is one.
you want to produce good people. You want to produce
Yeah.
people who can be happy, that kind of thing. But let me fast forward. We've only got a couple minutes left. Let me fast forward to today, and in particular, the impact of OpenAI, which is in the news of late
Boy,
because they fired the CEO for some weird reason, Sam Altman. But what is the Newhouse School, your program in particular? How has it been impacted by OpenAI and ChatGPT?
well, I'll talk about my classes and then I'll just talk in general about other faculty in the school. I'll begin with the other faculty. A lot of care and concern, and we need to stop this. This is keeping our students from learning how to write and a whole bunch of other things. And all I kept saying was, this is going to be in their future. So this isn't about what we decide for them as students. We should be thinking about what are they going to be doing in their careers. So taking my own medicine, I have rules on how they use, and I encourage them to use all these generative AI tools in their work in my classes. But I want them to cite it and say, here was my prompt, here's the response, here was the second prompt. And at last class, just last Wednesday, I asked, how many have used it? And they sheepishly put their hands up because they think, oh no, we're going to have my grade affected. I said, put them up
Every
proudly.
every one of them.
Almost all. And I asked how many of them have reused, like done a recast of their original question more than 4 times, more than 5 times, more than 6 times, up closing in on 10 times. I said, if that was a person, you would never ask them to write that many times. I know you're an author and you probably can disagree with this, but
I can, but I see your point. Yeah.
in 15 to 20 minutes, you can have multiple versions of things from which you can then sit back as an editor and curator and pick what things actually is right, what things are how you would say it. And then I have their final paper is they deliver it, the concise piece, and they have to highlight what was it that really just came from their noggins.
Well, I got to tell you, Sean, I put an ad on LinkedIn recently for a creative AI technologist. I thought I'd get a couple dozen, and I got 225 at.
You want some? I got some in my
Yeah,
class.
yeah, I do. I do actually.
And I
But
got a couple that are crazy
incredibly,
good.
it's for something I've written called the Book of Kells. Pardon me, the Book of O'Kells, which is a multimedia. Right, we Irish. It was a multimedia. It is a multimedia story that encompasses 7 generations in 7 novels, and I'm now looking at how do I train a model on the Book of O'Kells. So it's a whole
Wow.
new world. It's incredibly exciting, and it's unfortunately, well, fortunately or unfortunately, it's just the world now. You just have to embrace it, don't you?
Yep. I think not only it's you embrace it, I think shape it, jump in to shape it. It's not. It's a little baby. Like let's train it. Let's
Also,
teach
it's
it.
you
Let's
know
learn from it.
what an opportunity. I mean, it's like they're the first generation. They're going to grow up with it. They're going to know it in the same way that you and I grew up with online, and
Yeah.
sort of know online in a way that people who didn't grow up with it are not never going to quite understand, but is super helpful. I want to
True.
remind everyone you're listening to the Accelerator with Michael Conniff. That's me. Our guest today is Sean Branigan. He's the director of digital media and entrepreneurship at the Newhouse School at Syracuse University. Remember, we're a podcast available on all the major platforms, including Apple, Audible, oh gosh, Amazon, and about 10 others, plus Spotify and YouTube for video. Also, subscribe to conniff.substack, conniff.substack.com, to the newsletter that produces and distributes the podcast, as well as some additional wisdom. Sean, thank you so much
Thank you,
for being
Michael.
with us today. You've been an absolutely great guest, one of the best. So I really
Well,
appreciate. I knew
thank
you
you,
would.
man.
I knew you would be. I knew you would be. So thanks so much for being a part of this.
Good deal. Thank you.
And thank you all for listening. This is the Accelerator, and remember, we'll be back with another podcast before you know it.